Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our public meeting this evening on the Spartan Chemical Superfund site regarding the remedial excavation activities. Glad to have you on. We've got, I got about 6 people signed on right now, but we'll have more jumping in, I'm sure. My name is Jim Ostrowski, and I work in Eagle's Environmental Support Division. I'll be the moderator tonight and helping out in the background. Just a couple of logistical details for the public meeting. First of all lines are muted at this point, and I'll explain how we unmute lines later if you have questions. If you do have questions, you can type them into the question box. So the Q&A box on your Zoom toolbar, type them in there, and when we get to the question portion of the night, we'll be able to read them off. We are also recording the meeting. So all public meetings and hearings that we host, we record them all and we post them on our YouTube channel. So we'll post it up there, and I'll actually send a note to you all, everybody, an email when that's available. A couple other things, if you would, please check out, keep an eye on the chat. So the chat function, I'm going to send out a couple probably links throughout the evening and other things that our presenters reference. So keep an eye on that chat. If you do have questions, remember you can use the Q&A box. When we do get to the Q&A session, you can also click your raise hand icon. So if you have a question you'd rather ask verbally, click the raise hand icon at that point, and I will call you out and unmute your line so you can ask the question. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Martinson from our Remediation and Redevelopment Division, and he's going to take it over.
Good evening, everyone. Before we get started here, I'd like to do a quick round of introductions. I'm Eric Martinson with Eagle, and I am the state project manager for the Spartan Chemical Superfund site. Along with me is Nathan Zielinski, also with Eagle. He is our site geologist for the site. In addition to folks from Eagle, we have a member of Michigan's Department of Human Health and Services, a toxicologist, Jacob Carrick. And then we also have Eagle's contractor, WSP Consulting and Environmental, on the call this evening. We have Megan Sinar, who is the project manager for WSP, and then we also have Mr. Nate Peck, who is the engineer for the site for the remedial excavation. So, and with that being said, let me share my screen. Okay. So, as I said, our project team consists of myself, Eric Martinson, the project manager. We have Nathan Zielinski, the geologist, Jacob Carrick, the toxicologist with MDHHS, and then we also have.
Hey, Eric, I'm sorry to interrupt. We can't see your slide that you're trying to present, so I think you might have the wrong one up. Just to, you might just stop and reshare. No big deal. We see a slide, but it's not, I don't think, the one that you want to show.
Okay. That better?
There you go. Yep, that's it.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Apologies for that. And then with us tonight, we also have the project manager for the US EPA, Anna Wynn. Our excavation project contractors for this site are WSP Engineering and Consulting of Michigan, and the company that will be performing the remedial excavation is Taplin Enterprises. So just a little site meeting agenda here. I'll be giving a site history, a background on the 2015 excavation attempt, the 2020-2021 pilot study with excavation details, further details on the remedial excavation, the upcoming remedial excavation, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So, who is going to be doing the work? The Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, Eagle. What are we doing? Remedial soil excavation. Right now, we have it planned for the excavation to begin the week of June 12th, 2023, and extend into November of 2023. Why are we doing this excavation? We are going to be doing this to remove metals and VOC impacted soil along with a portion of the residual smear present at the water table. So as you can see here, outlined on the screen is the Spartan chemical site. It's located at 2539 28th Street Southwest, Wyoming and Kent County. So some of Spartan Chemical's Superfund site history. The Spartan Chemical Company operated from 1952 to 1992 as a bulk chemical transfer, blending, and repackaging plant. There were many above ground and below ground storage tanks on site that would store various chemicals. Spartan Chemical would direct mixed blends of chemicals into trucks from the storage tanks for delivery to their clients. There were known chemical spills that occurred between 1963 and 1990 at the site. In 1983, the site was added to the National Priorities List, or the NPL, designated for Superfund sites. In 1984, Spartan Chemical agreed to investigate the contamination at the site. So, what is a Superfund site? This is a common question we get, what Eagle gets. What is a Superfund site and how does it differ from other sites that have contamination? A Superfund site is a property where pollution exists in the soil, surface water, sediment, and or groundwater, but also meets certain criteria that qualifies it to be added to the NPL or National Priorities List. These sites are often complex and require various types of remediation. The Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, or as known as CERCLA, which is commonly known as Superfund, which falls into the Superfund category, give the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, the funds and authority to remediate contaminated sites when the polluter is not able to clean up the site. EPA can share this authority with states who can investigate, remediate on the sites on their behalf. The state is currently investigating and remediating the Spartan Chemical site as the lead agency using federal grant funds. In 1992, Spartan Chemical Company declared bankruptcy, and in 1993, the state of Michigan took over investigation and remediation at the site. Between 1993 and 2015, various investigation and remedial actions took place, which led to the 2015 soil excavation project. This project planned to remove soil from several areas known to have high amounts of contamination where the former chemical operations took place on the southern half of the property. So, as you can see on the side, some photos of some discolored soils that were found during concrete removal. Volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, were detected in the air on site above target levels for the project. So, what is a VOC? There are many different kinds of contaminants that we regulate, investigate, and remediate at Eagle. One of them, as I stated, is known as volatile organic compounds, abbreviated as VOCs. These compounds, which were found in soil at the Spartan site, can evaporate to the air. In certain quantities, they can be harmful if they are inhaled. They are commonly used in industrial settings for purposes like degreasing and solvents, and are used in commercial settings for dry cleaning clothing. During the 2015 excavation, when the soil was disturbed, VOCs began to evaporate in the air and were detected in air monitoring equipment by on-site Eagle contractors. Target levels were set for the project. When on-site air monitoring equipment detected concentrations of VOCs that exceeded those levels, work was stopped. A cover was placed over the excavated area to prevent contaminated air from leaving the site, and a new plan of action was developed to allow for safe removal of soil from the site. In 2020-2021, Eagle and its contractor completed a remedial excavation pilot study from October to January 2021. The purpose of this pilot study was to evaluate methods for controlling VOC emissions during soil and concrete excavation and loading activities. 3 methods for controlling VOC emissions were foam suppressant, liquid surfactant, temporary structure fitted with VOC filtering air handling units. Additionally, the task was to evaluate the effectiveness of treating soil so VOCs do not leach above non-hazardous landfill disposal requirements. Treating soil so that metals do not leach above non-hazardous landfill disposal requirements. So, waste characterization evaluation. A non-hazardous and hazardous disposal facility were contacted to determine the quantity of soil samples needed to sufficiently characterize the in situ or in-place soils at the site. Both landfills agreed that 1 composite sample per 200 cubic yards would be adequate. The 5 excavation areas were divided into a total of 18 waste characterization areas. Area 1 was divided into 4 waste characterization areas. Area 2 was divided into 2 waste characterization areas. Area 2B divided into 4 waste characterization areas. Area 3 divided into 4 waste characterization areas, and the additional area was divided into 4 waste characterization areas. So, the figure you see here is from the remedial excavation pilot study. In total, 36 composite samples were collected. Each composite sample consisted of 5 grab samples, totaling 180 grab samples. Air monitoring during this excavation, both work zone and perimeter air monitoring, was performed. Perimeter air monitoring was also performed. Samples were collected 1 time a week from a downwind location. There were a few exceedances of action levels at the site perimeter, but these were remedied quickly. Were discovered. Work zone upgrades. We upgraded from level D to level C in excavation 3. Additionally, we upgraded from level B, supplied air, in excavation 2B within the temporary structure. So now we move to the 2023 remedial excavation. Work hours will be from 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. The duration of the excavation is anticipated to last from June 2023 to November 2023, with an estimated 154 days of activity. Here you can see two different figures, a site location map showing the surrounding area, and then the Spartan Superfund chemical site outlined here in red with the black hatch showing where excavation will be completed. So here is another figure showing the final design. We will be demolishing two existing buildings, an existing warehouse and a former treatment building. Additionally, demolish and remove concrete and asphalt surrounding this area prior to the excavation. And this figure is the site plan. The area hatched, again, shows the area that will be excavated on site towards the southern half. Up towards the top, you can see where trucks will be coming in, getting loaded, and heading out. There will be no traffic to the west side of the site. All traffic will come from the east, along up north, and then west along Thornwood. Enter the site, turn around, and head back out the same way. Additionally, there will be a decon pad with a wheel washing area to prevent contaminants leaving the site. Here is a higher resolution figure of the areas being proposed for excavation. So, to recap, Eagle and his contractor will demolish two buildings that are located within Study Area 1, the excavation location. We will perform an excavation to remove impacted soil above the water table. We will utilize a VOC mitigating surfactant applied to disturbed soil. VOC mitigating surfactant and VOC mitigating perimeter misting system shall be installed to mitigate VOC emissions from the excavation. VOC mitigating foam shall be used in situations where open excavation or disturbed soils are left unattended. The excavation contractor will work closely with Eagle's contractor to perform this excavation, soil staging, loading, and transportation and disposal of contaminated material. Proper PPE will be utilized at all times and will vary in given situations. Complete restoration of ground surface will be completed in accordance with the approved specification. This includes, but is not necessarily limited to, topsoil and seeding all disturbed areas, smoothing ruts, repairing any damage to existing roads, and removing soil erosion sedimentation controls after vegetative stabilization is well established. So, one question we get as well, one question Eagle gets is, how does Eagle know what levels of each chemicals are safe for people to breathe? Eagle toxologists develop site-specific criteria based on the best available data. On-site workers collect samples of air during the day. Each sample is analyzed, results are compared to criteria. So with that being said, now I'd like to bring in Jacob Carrig from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services to help us learn a little bit more about how our agencies develop screening levels for chemicals and how we use them. Welcome, Jacob.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So yeah, I'm just going to provide some general background about how we evaluate data. So when samples are collected, for example, those air samples that might be analyzed for VOCs, and once we receive that data, one way we determine whether any of the chemicals that were detected pose a potential public health hazard is we compare those detected levels to our screening levels, which are essentially health protective standards that we can compare our results to and see, is it below or above that level? And that helps us determine what the next steps are in an investigation. So the screening levels that we use are developed by Eagle and MDHHS, and they take into account information from other agencies like EPA. But I'll kind of describe how these screening levels are developed and walk through this process briefly here. So to start off, scientists will review the literature for a particular chemical. They'll look at all different types of studies that have been published that showed some measure of exposure and some health effects that occurred as a result of that. And from among all that literature, they'll identify some particular study or studies to serve as a basis for calculating the screening level. And when they're looking through those studies, they're focusing in on studies that are showing health effects that occur at lower levels of exposure. The idea is that if we're protecting against those effects that occur at low levels of exposure, we're also protecting against any health effects that might occur at higher levels of exposure. So once they select some basis for calculating a screening level, they have to kind of translate that information into values that are relevant to the general public, because it might be an animal study or it might be an occupational study or something of a that was looking at a particular type of population. So there are various calculations involved in that, kind of translating it to the general public. Another aspect of that process is that they consider a standard kind of hypothetical scenario. So they basically say, okay, if people are exposed to this chemical for this length of time under these specific conditions, how high does that chemical have to be for it to be a potential public health hazard? And that scenario that they consider is very conservative, meaning it's kind of a worst case scenario. So the result of all those calculations and things is we end up with a screening level that is very protective, including it's protective of sensitive individuals, the elderly, children who might be still developing, those types of groups. So these are the screening levels we use. And of course, science is always evolving. So as new information comes out, these screening levels are occasionally updated as needed. And then on the next slide, I'll just provide a little bit more information about how we use these screening levels. And you can go ahead and just kind of click through all those there. But yeah, this arrow in the middle, we can view as the concentration of a chemical in the air. Oops. And that bluish line there, you can think of as the screening level. So if we get a detection of a chemical below that screening level, we have high confidence that there's no significant risk of health effects for someone who could be exposed to that concentration in the air. If there's a detection above that screening level, that's our signal that tells us that some kind of action is needed, whether that's reducing exposure or reducing the concentration in the air somehow, or performing further investigation of some kind. It also tells us that there's some potential that it could pose a health hazard. And recall that these screening levels are very conservative, so there's kind of a margin of safety built into that. So just because there is a detection above the screening level doesn't necessarily mean that someone exposed to that would experience health effects. It's important to note that's going to depend on a number of personal factors. For example, how long someone is exposed to that, how much of the chemical they're exposed to, as well as their personal sensitivity, their genetics, whether they have any existing health conditions, lifestyle choices, and whether they're exposed to that chemical from any other sources. So that all is just a real quick run through of kind of some of the things that go into evaluating, for example, the air data that might be collected at this site. And from there, I'll turn it back over to Eric.
Thank you, Jacob. So next steps. As I previously stated, 2023, Eagle and its contractor WSP will perform full-scale soil remediation. From 2023 to 2025, we will evaluate vapor intrusion concentrations at nearby facilities. And then in 2023 to 2025, collecting additional groundwater data and perform an analysis for a groundwater study. So here's our contacts, myself here, Eric Martinson, and Jacob Carrick, with any questions you may have.
All right. Thank you, Eric. I'm gonna actually bring up my slides back again here. And we're gonna open it up for questions. So any of you have questions that you have after that presentations, please let us know. You can type into the question box or click the raise hand icon on your Zoom toolbar and we'll get to those. And I don't have any questions in my queue yet. So we'll give it a minute or so to see if anybody has any for our team. And it looks like we do have a hand raised. We did. So if you raised your hand a minute ago, but put it down. So there we go. All right. So Connie's got a question. Connie, go ahead. You can unmute your line and ask your question for our team here.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. I've got 2 questions. Long time ago, I was in the Superfund program at USCPA in DC, and seeing that Michigan has been dealing with this site since 1993, we're looking at 30 years, and this site has not been remediated yet. Look at the exposure. Look at the human exposure to people, to animals, to birds. You let this go for 30 years? I would have to hear the rationale for that. Secondly, you talk about using foam suppressant, liquid suppressant. Have you checked those suppressants for the presence of PFAS compounds? If so, I'd like to know, have you checked it? And what are the PFAS concentrations and suppressants that you're going to be using? And number 3, I would say this would have been a more complete presentation if you had just said a couple words about the groundwater quality, because we know that soil is contaminated with heavy metals and volatiles. We know it's going to the groundwater. So we know Kent County as a whole really has some issues here, having a lot of PFAS sites. So those are my 3 questions.
Okay, thanks, Connie. And so we got 3 questions there for Eric about the duration of the cleanup process, the suppressants being used and whether that contain PFAS or what's in the foams, and then the groundwater contamination. I don't know if you want how you want to address each of those.
So I think I'll take question 1 and 3. I might ask WSP to hop in here on number 2, but for number 1, the duration, yes, it has been some time that Eagle and the EPA have been efforting to get this site cleaned up. Currently, I guess, as you know, well, maybe you don't know, Connie, we do have a fence, so it is secured, which is good. But we are, I think we are finally making significant progress. And I think this remedial action of removing contaminated material from the site is a big, big step. This will help to eliminate the surrounding vapor intrusion issues, and then possibly any leaching issues into the groundwater. I know that there's some concerns moving on to question 3, which I believe was dealt with the groundwater situation. We do have a plan for that. We do have a scope of work for our contractor that's going to be evaluating specifically that deep VOC plume that we have identified through the site. So we do have a plan in place. We're getting there. I guess in regards to the foam for PFAS, or the foam containing any PFAS, I don't know, Megan, if you wanted to hop on, or Nate, just to maybe shed some light on that, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. The foam and surfactant that have been specified have all been tested, and there's no PFAS detections in either of those. So that was something we spent some time looking into and narrowing down back in the pilot study that we did in whatever year that was, 2021. So as far as that goes, no, there's no PFAS in the suppressants that will be used out there.
All right, thanks. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your question. We do have a question that came in through the question box. This person's asking, what are the plans for the site after the cleanup is complete?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Currently, we do not have any specific redevelopment plans. But in a situation like this, once the site has been cleaned up, restored, you know, there's always the possibility for maybe some future commercial opportunities in that area. But as far as redevelopment, a redevelopment plan or redevelopment study, we have not gotten to that stage yet.
Okay. We don't have any other questions right now. I do want to mention we do have a person on the phone listening in. So if you are on the phone and you have a question, you can hit #2 on your phone, hit #2, and that'll show us that your hand is raised and we can unmute your line. So we'll give it a second to see if we have any more questions pop up here. And I hope you guys noticed in the chat, I did drop some links, including Eric's contact information, as well as links to the Spartan Chemical website. We also have an email notification list that you can get signed up for. So as things are done or things you want to be notified on related to this site, you'll be sent an email. People that are signed up for that list did get a couple email notifications about this meeting, for example. So that's how you'd stay informed about what's happening, because of course we don't expect to be checking the website all the time, but we do use that list to send out notifications. Okay. All right, team, well, I don't see any other questions coming up here. So I don't know, Eric, if you want to wrap us up or if you have anything you want to say kind of going out now.
Well, first, I'd like to thank everybody, including the project team that joined tonight. I really appreciate the support, and I'm really excited to get this remedial excavation underway. I believe it's been some time coming, but this is a huge step to get this site remediated. And personally, I'm very excited to hit the ground running and get going. So.
All right, thanks, Eric. Yeah, so just want to remind you all that we did record this session. And so if you know of somebody that might have missed it and wanted to watch it, I'll be emailing you all the link to the recording as soon as it's up and available on our YouTube channel. Might be a couple of days, but be looking out for that. And we'll also post it on the Spartan Chemical website as soon as that's available as well. Yes, I want to thank you all for joining us. I know it's a beautiful evening, and we really appreciate you taking the time to spend some time to learn about what's going on here and to stay informed. If you have further questions, of course, you can reach out to Eric directly through his email or phone, as I put on the screen. So thanks to the team here that's with us tonight, and thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.